各位朋友，晚上好！欢迎您观看服务器艺术、当代影像、路径及其可能第17期线上论坛。我们非常荣幸地邀请到德国著名摄影艺术家、杜塞尔多夫学派的代表人物托马斯·鲁夫，摄影评论家姜蓉和糊涂，艺术理论家臧策，青年影像文化学者陈国森，围绕与托马斯·鲁夫谈原摄影的探索和实践展开分享和讨论。本次线上论坛由摄影师、电影工作者、巴德学院摄影系校友夏静怡担任翻译，在此表示感谢。接下来有请主持人、艺术理论家臧策老师。
大家好，我是今天的主持人臧策，欢迎大家来到服务器艺术当代影像路径及其可能第17期。今天我们非常荣幸地邀请到了德国著名的摄影艺术家杜塞尔多学派的代表人物之一托马斯·鲁夫先生，给我们与我们共同讨论摄影的问题。熟悉摄影的朋友们都知道，今年呢在丽水国际摄影节上，托马斯·鲁夫先生做了一个非常精彩的这个展览。然后呢，我们在丽水也跟托马斯·鲁夫先生展开了一个呢非常精彩的学术讨论。那么由于这个时间的关系呢，我们这个讨论呢，这个意犹未尽，所以呢，今天我们又在服务器艺术这个平台特意呢邀请托马斯·鲁夫先生做客我们服务器艺术，来与我们继续进行有关于他的这个展览的更加深入的讨论。当然这个讨论会涉及更多的问题，对，也可能呢会更加有趣和精彩。那么今天呢，这个参与我们讨论的嘉宾呢，都是大家非常熟悉的朋友。那么呢，首先有非常著名的策展人，也是呢在丽水讨论会上的主持人，姜蓉老师，他是多次做客我们服务器艺术，对，做过非常好的分享。然后呢，有这个陈国森。陈国森博士呢，也是我们非常熟悉的一个朋友了，因为在这个前几次的我们的这个直播中，国森也是一个非常重要的嘉宾。另外呢，我们今天呢还特意的邀请到了这个我们做这个摄影教育的一个非常棒的老师，就糊涂老师。糊涂的摄影教育，我一直呢对开玩笑说，我说糊涂不糊涂，对这个对我是很这个赞赏他的这个摄影，对他这个关于摄影的这些个脉络什么梳理的就非常的清楚，对。然后呢，我们仍然要感谢今天担任翻译的夏静怡老师，也是这个肖尔的学生。我们历次呢跟肖尔跟这些个国外的嘉宾讨论的时候，都是由静怡来做翻译的。这个非常的辛苦，而且他翻译的也非常好。另外呢，就是我们更要感谢史阳坤老师，就是每次我们有国外嘉宾的这个研讨，都是呢这个由他来提供的这个。我们的这个注目坊间，对，也这个做了非常好的这个后台的支持。首先谢谢各位嘉宾，也谢谢各位呢今天观看我们直播的这些个观众朋友们。我们在这个第一单元的这个讨论中，我们首先呢有请糊涂老师向鲁夫先生提问。好，下面就有请糊涂。对。
好的，主持人，鲁夫先生你好。那策展人呢，在谈到你的创作时候，曾经提到，你的创作呢不是单张的，每个作品呢都是通过系列照片来寻找一种具有相似性和共通性的影像模型。为了寻找这种影像模型，你需要像研究人员一样，进行一系列的漫长的测试和推演来生成影像。从一开始的初步影像，经过不断的修整和调整，最后创造出最终的影像模型。那么我的问题是，这些影像原型是来自于视觉文化的结构，还是源自你对影像语言内部逻辑的感知？你怎么来分辨，怎么来确认你所创造的影像原型已经完美的 被提炼成一种影像模型？谢谢。
Okay, when I entered the art academy in Düsseldorf in 1977, I was 19. And of course, at that time, I did not have a kind of a concept of what kind of photography I'm going to do. So this has been all a very slow development. When I came into the class of Bernd Becher, he taught us that, yeah, you should choose a matter and then, yeah, shoot it for all your life. So he took himself as an example. And when I was then, yeah, working on my first series, the interiors, they did not at all look very conceptual. It was just a kind of documentation of my apartment, the apartments of my friends, the houses of my relatives, that I was shooting rooms or sleeping rooms, all the different rooms that were in these houses or buildings. And at that time, it was not yet this kind of conceptual. So it was an ongoing process. And maybe only when after that, started taking portraits, it became more conceptual. Because at that time, I had the feeling that the portrait had disappeared from contemporary art. And I wanted to make a really simple, conceptual, minimalist portrait of my friends and my colleagues at the Art Academy. And so I developed a concept with the lighting, the setup of the portrait. I choose this very narrow frame, like a passport photograph. And I also wanted to erase all the conventions that were connected with the portrait. So I really wanted to bring the portrait back to, let's say 0.0, to leave everything out that is disturbing, just concentrating on the face, this very crop of the portrait. Okay, so actually there was no prototype when I started at the Art Academy. I really wanted to shoot. I used a 4x5-inch view camera, and I wanted to make the sharpest photographs possible. Yeah, so at that time, I still believe that photography captures reality, that reality in front of the camera is that it's possible to capture this reality. And so I did a pretty nice series, the first series with shooting interior photographs of, my apartment, the apartment of my friends, my family, relatives, the parents of my friends. And actually, at that time, I was a student taking photographs. It happens only until I started the portrait series that I realized that, okay, the camera is capturing reality. Also, the camera is capturing what's in front of it, but it's the person behind the camera who decides what is on the photograph. And in terms of the portraits, it was, of course, me who picked the person, the friend, Vera or Peter or Johann. And sometimes, I asked them, this is a nice shirt, can you wear it? I made the light setup, and I told them can you go up, can you go down, a bit left, right? So I was the person who had the control over the photograph. So I then realized that, yeah, the camera records what's in front of it, but it can be a prearranged reality. So that was the first time that this kind of misbelief in photography showed up in my work. Also, working in series. So actually, if you take a portrait of a person and you want, let's say I want to explain the human beings to an alien, I cannot take one photograph. I have to take at least two, a male and a female person. And then also two portraits are too little. So I have to do more portraits. And the best thing, of course, would be to shoot every single person on the planet, which I thought at that time is just impossible. And so I reduced it, at that time to my friends and colleagues at the Art Academy. So, and at that time, there were not yet immigrants in Germany. The Art Academy was mainly German students and some students from East or Western Europe. So it was a pretty homogene group of people, which, of course you can shoot these portraits. Today, it would be not a proper thing, but at that time, it was. These were the people or the persons that I had access to, and that I could make a portrait of. So let's say that the portraits was the first more conceptual series that I was shooting. And that was between 1986 and 1991. I then continued with other series. So working in series probably something that was the essence of in the class of Bernd and Hila Becher. It was a kind of you should shoot properly, not only take one photograph, but at least a couple of photographs, so that you can get an impression of the issue that you're busy with. And actually, I was shooting analog until 2000. So another 9 years. So the stars were shot analog. The night photographs were shot analog. My andere portraits, it was, I used my own archive of portraits for doing that. And at that time, when I had, let's say, 4 or 5 series, I really was thinking, oh, Thomas, what are you doing? You don't have a kind of a constant flow. You don't have a brand. You don't have something that makes you recognize, but you jump from the portrait to the interior, to the newspaper photographs, to the stars, and that made me feel a bit uncomfortable. And only, maybe 20 years later, I realized that all the different series or all this kind of jumping is maybe a kind of a puzzle I'm working on. It's like you have pieces of puzzles that you add together to get a kind of a bigger image. And what I found out was that maybe that bigger image is the techniques, the history, the issues that are dealing with photography.
All right, Thomas, if you have finished answering the first question, I would like to follow up with my question as well by using a PPT. So let me share the PPT first so that I can better explaining myself and asking you the question. So, in an exhibition about portraits of Renaissance period held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York a few years ago, I noticed that early portrait paintings were profile painting, like this one.
Yes.
And then later, the painters, because at that time, the painter were not able to use the linear perspective. Only later they started to use linear perspective to be able to create this type of painting, which is more three-dimensional and also looking sideward instead of just a profile painting.
Yes.
So when you started doing the portrait series, you also started with this linear perspective with the sitter looking sideward. And then afterwards, not only you use a neutral background and also, output it with a very large size of prints. You also make frontal portraits. And I was thinking that if your creative process typically involves, like curator Valeria said, that first seeking out the visual models before establishing an image archetype, then my guess is that the Augusta Sanders portraits would serve as one of the visual models for your portrait series. Not only is Sander, as you know, a leading figure of new objectivity movement, but the majority of his portraits are also frontal views, like the one we are seeing right now. So, at the same time, I also think that the image archetype for your portrait series could be enlarged passport photo, as you put it just now. But I'm curious to know what really prompts you to decide to shoot frontal portraits. That's my first questions about portrait series.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So when I started the portraits, I thought I want to make a kind of a large amount of portraits. So I thought about I should make 100 portraits and then hang them in a row. Like that's a pretty common display in not only German but European art. And when I then started thinking about installing, let's say the 100 each next to each other, I thought maybe it's boring to have only one type of background. So what I did, I put some photo cartons in different colors. I put it on the table, and then the sitter picks his favorite color, and then it was attached to the wall, and that was then the background. And also to do, maybe it's also a little reference to the Bechers. So then at that time I was a student. I did not have much money, so I did only 4 photographs because the 4x5-inch negative and the development was pretty expensive, and we could not do that at the art academy, so I had to pay for them. So I started with a front, then I tried it either left or right, And then sometimes I ask the sitter to, let's do profile. And those portraits so I did not select in the display, I did not select for the color, but there should not be two red next to each, not two red backgrounds beside each other. So it was a kind of, the color was jumping, and then also the front, the 3/4, and also the profile. It was always a mix, so to make a more interesting display. So that was, let's say that was my student work. And of course, as a student, you don't have money. So I made small prints. So those portraits that were 18 by 24 centimeters. That's a kind of a standard format in German photography. But while I was shooting these portraits, I did them from 1981 up to 1986. There was kind of a wish that maybe I could try it one time in a larger size. Because I think in mid of the 80s, the large image was in the air in photography. There were also already some German photographers like Katharina Sieverding, Günter Förg. There, of course, was Jeff Wall with his large, big light boxes. And there were, Ian Wallace and, there was, the large scale photo was in the air. And at a certain point when I had enough money, I tried my first large scale print of a portrait. And I was very surprised because it was not just a blown up of 8 by 10 inch photograph, but it was a completely new image. The physical presence was changed completely. And also, yes, I always like to tell a small episode. When I had an exhibition with my small portraits in Düsseldorf, of course, all my friends and the sitter, they showed up at the opening. And a friend of mine was standing next to a portrait. He says, "Oh, there's Peter," and he's pointing to the photograph. And then I looked at him and told him, "Oh, no, that's not Peter. That's his photograph. Peter is over there with Heinz." So I realized that people mix photography with reality. And creating a big size portrait of, let's take Peter. The next thing, yes, the same friend is then at the other opening with large scale portraits. He stands in front of the portrait of Peter, large scale, and he says, "Wow, this is a big photograph of Peter." Then he got it, that he's looking at a photograph and not at the person itself. So that was a kind of change of perception of photography. So the large scale really helped that people looked at photographs as a photograph and not as reality. Of course, the photograph still represents reality, but people became aware of the medium. And that was, at that time, very important for me. And when I then continued with the large-scale portraits, I realized that I don't need this kind of colored background anymore, because in the large size, there's so much color in the face, in the hair, in the clothes, that I should use a more neutral background, kind of whitish, light gray background. And then I also realized that the most impression, or probably it has something to do with the perception of human beings. So the most interesting thing for a human being is looking into another human being's face. And I think that made those portraits so successful because they fit perfectly in terms of psychological needs. And so I continued in large scale, with a large scale and frontal view and neutral background.
Thank you. If I may, I would like to ask a follow-up questions. So additionally, I have also noticed that many of your series, like the portrait series, are vertical compositions. At the symposium in Lishui, I asked you why most of your works are vertical rather than horizontal. And you replied to me that only about 60% of your works are vertical, and those works are not landscape photographs. So in traditional, so this is Auguste Sanders' photo, which is also frontal.
Yeah.
And so in the traditional Chinese painting like this one, which is a famous painting by Fang Huang, it's called Travelers Among Mountains and the Stream. And we can see that two travelers with donkeys are traveling near the stream at the foot of a very tall mountain. And this is also vertical rather than horizontal, even though it is landscape. And in Chinese traditional painting, we use three sections to show the perspective and also the height of the mountain. We have foreground, and then the middle ground, and then the background to show how high the mountain is, so that when the viewer looking at these vertical presentations of the mountain, it will create not only the perspective and the height of the mountain, but also created a kind of an awe for the viewer. So my question to you is really about, do you think you unconsciously have been creating, many of your series in vertical format because of the first, most famous, one of the most famous series of your work is Portrait, which is a vertical format. And unconsciously, perhaps, this is my guess, that for the following series, like you said, 60% of your work are also in vertical format. And do you think you are unconsciously doing that? Because if we look at this image from NASA, which is not really vertical, it's square, and your star series is also vertical. So my question to you, whether this is unconscious or conscious, you did it unconsciously or consciously?
No, I think it's very easy. It's just the horizontal vertical format just follows the matter that I'm shooting. So, for example, after the portraits, I was shooting these buildings, and they are, I think, 80% of them are horizontal because buildings are built like this. And the next series was the night photographs, and they were squares because the camera delivered only a circle, and a circle, if you add the four corners, is a square. I don't think there's some unconsciousness in choosing the format. Maybe the only psychological effect is with the stars. So my first idea with the stars was a horizontal format. And so I had the first print I had hung in my studio, and I looked at this horizontal format, and it just looked boring. And then I needed some space, and I wanted to move it away and put it up in a 90-degree angle, and suddenly the image worked because it changed from window to door. And so you really then had the feeling you can enter the image because it's a door. And normally, if you look out of the window, you don't jump out of the window, but with a door, you go out. So that's probably a psychological issue that I then, the stars had to be definitely vertical. And in terms of statistic, probably 60% are vertical and 40% are horizontal. But I still think that has something to do with what I'm shooting.
Thank you, thank you. OK，战策，那我现在问完了，第一部分问完，请你再往下主持。
好的，我觉得刚才这个问题非常有意思哈，这也是这个我老说那个叫这个摄影师与观者之间的目光交错，这也是非常有意思的一个问题。对，那么下面那个陈国森老师来这个开始你的提问。
Okay, good afternoon, Ms. Hoof. It's been quite some time since we last met in the Literature Symposium. And a few hours ago, Stephen Shaw sent us our interpreter, where are you and me? Stephen Shaw, he sent us a New Year's greeting by email, including some of his photographs. I was just wondering whether you received it as well. In any case, I'd like to wish you a very happy new year in advance. So, briefly speaking, my question is, I agree with what Balakia said at the Literature Symposium that you and scientists are both inventors. Scientists invent instruments to capture objective data, which is often called abstract and non-human. And in your work, however, you seem to take this kind of cold machine data and, in a sense, humanize it. For example, by coloring Mars so it appears more familiar or to evoke a sense of romance. So I'd like to ask you, how do you see the gap between the machine's cold objectivity and our human-like or warm way of perceiving? And why is it so important for you to transform this distant scientific data into images that feel familiar or even romantic to us? Thank you. This is my question.
Okay, so you mentioned the camera is a cold machine, and it's just recording what's in front of it. And then you just have to. There's not only art photography, but there's a lot of different photography out in the world. So actually, since the invention of photography, also scientists immediately used photography for their interests. They were shooting stars, they were shooting micro, macro, all different kind of things. They invented high-speed cameras to make things visible that the human eye or the naked eye cannot recognize. And maybe I can call myself a kind of engineering photographer. So I'm really fascinated by these machines and how these machines create images that, you cannot see with naked eye. And so it's just my interest. It's pretty wide. I love all different kind of photographs, and I don't want to concentrate on this narrow kind of artistic photography, which is, it's nice, but I think artistic photography did not deliver or does not deliver the most important photographs. They come from other areas or things. But I'm fascinated, and I just can't stop working with these photographs because I think I find them so fascinating. And then, of course, we also have this big history of adding color to a black and white photograph, retouching photographs. And these are all things in the history of photography that I find also fascinating. So in a way, I'm combining strange photographs with strange photographic techniques to create a kind of new strange image. And actually, maybe, let's go back to Rome. That's something that's probably, it's not unconscious, but it's somewhere here in the back. And also sometimes images show up in the front that have been hiding for 20 years in the back, and they show up, and then I have to work on them. Concerning the stars, of course, a lot of people, if they stand in front of stars, they think of their last holidays on an island where they could see a lot of stars at the night. But if I look at my stars, I'm looking at them in terms of, I have the coordinates. I can exactly tell you which star it is. And if I then go back to the books that I have, I can find the name of the star, I can find the distance of the star, I can find whether it's moving towards us, whether it's going away from us. I'm looking differently at these stars. And what can I say? No, of course, I grew up in Europe. I grew up with 2,000 years of painting, sculpture, and so that's my cultural background. And I'm using all different kind of techniques to then create those images. And sometimes I do them just for pleasure. Sometimes they have a kind of more or less political intervention with the portraits. It was just that when I started them in 1981, we all had read George Orwell's 1984. And we were really looking forward to the state and surveillance that the state is going to provide for us. And with the night photographs, of course, they were inspired by the Second Gulf War, because on TV you could see for the first time these kind of greenish images that journalists use this kind of military technique to how do you say, transmit the war in the Middle East to our Western homes. So it's always a kind of, it's a mix of interests and things that make me either sad up or make me laugh. And I cannot tell exactly, how I'm creating these works and why I'm creating these works.
Okay, yeah, thank you for your answer. I remember that you made a very large-scale machine series and some photographs of industrial machinery in factories, and but it isn't included in this leisure exhibition. They look almost like an archive of machines. So thank you again. Now back to 上次 to continue moderating.
好的，这个谢谢国森老师，谢谢托马斯。那么在这个丽水的这个讨论会上，呃，这个我记得鲁夫先生说过，说他这个最重要就是保持好奇心哈。我当时呢就讲，我说我这个人就是好奇心非常的大，对，所以呢，你看我从文学到摄影到这个艺术到哲学，对，这个到神经科学、神经美学，对，完全都是在这个为了满足我的这种对各种这种知识的好奇心。那么呢，我呢，这个在这个鲁夫先生的展览里头呢，这个看到说，鲁夫先生也认为影像只能在我们的脑海中生成。对，所以这句话呢，让我这个非常的这个感兴趣，因为我呢非常的同意这一观点，因为这个神经科学证明嘛，我们的这个影像实际是在我们的大脑里被合成的，对，而不是说我们眼睛看见那个直接的东西，对。所以呢，我呢特别的想问这个鲁夫先生，对这个，那么你对影像摄影的媒介进行了各种不同的摄影的媒介，进行了呢一系列的这个探索尤其从胶片到数字影像，他们之间的那种生成关系，他们之间背后的那个技术的东西，都做了非常，这个所谓理解媒介，对，做了非常重要的探索。那么呢，这个接下来我特别感兴趣的问题是，既然这个你认为，影像是在大脑里生成的，那么实际在我看来，人的大脑本身就是一个非常重要的影像的媒介，它也是一个媒介，那么你是否考虑过对大脑这个媒介，也进行进一步的这个探索？以及呢，这个我在你那个作品，就那个作品，就展出那个作品那个迷幻，在那个作品里头呢，我也看到了这个那个也是与人类的感知嘛，与那个人的感知视觉是有关的，与那个大脑生成是有关的，所以我也想问，那个作品是不是意味着你对这个大脑作为媒介这样的一种视觉的呈现的一个探索的开始？这是我一个非常好奇的问题。所以正好今天那个研讨会上来不及多问，所以我觉得今天正好可以聊聊这个问题，我觉得非常的有意思。好，谢谢。
It's it's a good question whether images are created with the brain. Maybe you can say yes, but you need the whole body for that. Because if you have only a brain, you cannot see the images that you created. So it's no, it's yes. No, sorry. How can I explain? I think you need the whole human being to create an image. Because if you have only brain, the brain has at first, yeah, let's take newborn baby brain without any experience. And then you take the brain of a man or woman 30 years old, which is full of experiences that he or she made through their life until then. And only this experience enables the brain to create images. So it's not only the brain, of course, the brain is a pretty important thing, but it's the whole body. And it's not only my body, but the bodies of my friends. And then it's the society, and then it's the whole human beings. So images are created by, how can I say, the entity of the world and the experience that one human being made in this world. And yes, of course, we don't see with our eyes. The eyes are only the optical part of seeing, but then it's transformed to the brain. And then the brain reacts, and the brain can only react to images that are related to the life you are leading. And then it depends on in which culture you grew up, because I think I would guess that my perception of images are maybe not that much, but it's different to the perception that you have growing up in Asia. And then of course, then we have to communicate to understand each other and to exchange experiences. Yeah, easiest thing is food. I love Chinese food. I love European food, but of course, let's say 40 years ago, I grew up on the countryside in Germany. We did not have Chinese food. I had to learn what is Chinese food later on. So yeah, that's what I want to say. It's not the brain that creates images. It's the whole human being. And to reduce brain activity in the works of the dope, it's looking at the dope work. You also have to have, let's say, a kind of experience with the tradition of, these kind of imagery. So, for example, if you take a medieval painting of, what's his first name? Grünewald, it's an altar. And then you have the ascension of Jesus Christ, and then you have hell, and then you have other parts of the so-called Catholic world. And for me, they always looked like a kind of psychedelic painting. And when I think how he could create these kind of images, I then thought, he must have taken mushrooms to create these kind of crazy images. Or another nice example is Hieronymus Bosch, who painted really crazy creatures. So I wouldn't say that there's a direct link from my brain to the dope work. It also goes via my body, my experience, my blood, my hands. Actually, a friend of mine made experiments with, he attached some sound to my head, and then via concentration, I should move the cursor on the computer and say, I want to have a dot, I want to have a rectangle, I want to have it green, red. And it was funny because sometimes it worked, sometimes it did not work. And myself, and I think also he, doesn't know exactly how it works. But those were very simple experiments that we once tried. But still, as to perceive a work of art or an image or a photograph, whatever, to read a newspaper article, you need the whole body. It's not only the brain.
是的，是的，我这个非常同意鲁夫的观点。我的意思实际是说， 大脑就是身体的一部分，就是说它已经对，就是包括身体和这个大脑，对，它的意思就是它就是包括身体的，对，那么这个问题呢，这非常的有意思，你比如说呢，这个我曾经写过一篇文章，名字就叫呢这个大脑与眼球的遭遇。我感觉那个相机是没有意识的，对，它是没有算法的，所以呢，它的那个光学成像呢，类似于我们眼睛的视网膜看到的那个影像，对。但是呢，这个我们对这个影像的理解，就包括鲁夫刚才说的这个文化的这个什么这个身体经验的生命体验的这些东西，包括语言这个概念，对对这个视觉的理解，实际是大脑看出来的。对，实际上呢，这个对，所以摄影是一种大脑与眼球的遭遇，是非常有意思的。另外呢，这个在2012年左右的时候，就是十几年前了。对，那个我那时候呢提出一个理论，就叫原影像理论。对，那个也是探讨，就是说我认为摄影不仅仅是通过影像这个投射外部世界的这样的。实际呢，它更是一个反观自身的，就是说，实际上它更在于理解我们人类的意识是如何识别这些个影像，来如何识别这些个影像中的形象，对，如何把一个物理的信息解读为一个我们这个情绪的意义的这样的一个信息，对，这个理论主要关注这个，所以我也希望呢，将来而且鲁夫先生这个展览，我觉得对，就是提到了语言摄影，提到了这些方面，对我也觉得以后这个还会这个方面的话题继续跟鲁夫先生探讨。好，这个下面这个咱们进入到这个第二个单元，进入到第二个单元。第二单元呢，这个
上课老师打断你一下，我可以花1分钟稍微回应一下您
好，
的，
说一下，可以，
很短1分钟。So I'd
OK
like to
OK，
take a minute to briefly respond to both you and Zhang Ce. So when you were answering Zhang Ce's question just now, you began by saying that the formation of an image also requires the involvement of the entire body, of the whole body. Coincidentally, I recently read a book called Das Gehirn an Beziehungssorgen eine phänomenologisch Konzeption, written by Thomas Fuchs. Sorry, my Deutsch pronunciation isn't very good. And the book was translated into Chinese and introduced it to readers in China not long ago. The core argument of the books is remarkably close to your position. So put it simply, it says that we cannot think in terms of the brain alone. The brain is a relational organ. It only functions together with the body and, more importantly, not just our own body, but the bodies of others as well. So that is my response. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So please continue, Moderator 张老师可以继续了。
Yeah, okay, maybe then we can go over to the robots and to AI because, yeah, with the robots, with AI, they are trying to create a kind of a neurological network that comes close to our brain. But of course, they have to give information to that brain. And it's the same with the human brain. So if you don't have any experience, the brain is empty. And so now they are trying to fill in this robot brain with experiences and information that, yes, of course, all come from human beings. And they are trained by human beings. So they probably want to bring it close to a human being. But yeah, the question is, it's a big question. Can AI or robot with AI become a unique personality as a human being? And they say it will be in 10 years, within 10 years, then we have, we can create duplicates of Thomas Hoff, Cezanne. But it will be funny, or maybe it will not be funny, it will be dangerous. Now, I think photography is just one cultural activity that we are using. We have language, we have photography, we have other medias, we have TV, we have film, and this is just one form of a kind of a, let's say it's a communication system. We exchange information with this. And every person has a different kind of access or idea of to communicate, and that makes it so interesting. And sometimes I also think, what's the real function of photography? Is it capturing reality? Is it showing how nice the party last night was to my friends? What's the real, what does photography do? And then you, of course, can go back into the history of photography, and then we realize that photography, because it's so realistic, it has been used to pretty often to manipulate people, to use photography in the interest of either the people who have money, the people who have power, and so on. But I think, I hope there's still a lot of anarchists out there who work against these kind of, pressure, manipulation, etc., etc. And the more we are, the better. And so I also think whether I lost ground, because I'm thinking about photography, but I'm not, I'm still practicing photography, but in a kind of a strange way, because I'm analyzing photography. But what I saw in the exhibitions I still say Li Shui, that's the German pronunciation, I'm sorry. There's still a lot of interesting photographs dealing with reality and shooting reality in a way that is really fascinating. Okay, so actually I don't know what this has to do with our human brain, but it's part of this.
好，因为我感觉呢，这个人工智能呢，跟这个真实的人本身最大的区别，恰恰就是身体。对，因为它没有作为这个身体的这种感知。对，所以呢，那么今天呢特别有意思，就在若干小时前，姜荣老师微信还发给我一篇文章，说是山姆奥特曼说通用人工智能啊已经来临，对。然后呢，后来我也回了另外一篇科学家和哲学家的文章，说这个还很遥远，对。所以呢，我是实际上更加倾向于第二种观点，就是对我认为它尚不具备人类的身体的感知，对。所以呢，我觉得今天谈通用人工智能可能还为时过早，对。好，这个话题我们先不说，我们进入到第二个单元。那么进入到第二单元呢，我们首先有请姜荣老师向鲁夫提问。
OK 谢谢赞策老师谢谢鲁夫刚才的回答。I think before I started asking my question, I also need to share my PPT. And I agree with what Thomas Zhang and also Guosen talk about the relationship between body and mind when it comes to creating artwork, especially photography. We also need to use our hand and our experiences. And before we really delve more in depth into this topic and also the topic related with AI in our later section, I'd like to ask you questions about appropriation. So, as you know, influenced by post-structuralist theories such as Roland Barthes' The Depths of the Author, in 1970s, we saw the emergence of pictures generations photographers in the United States, including Cindy Sherman, Richard Prince, and Shirley Levine. And through techniques like appropriation, they question photography's authenticity and originality and authorship. So German contemporary painter Gerhard Richter also appropriated news photographs in his work to explore issues of photography, authenticity, and the relationship between painting and photography. You too have also extensively appropriated news photographs and scientific imageries as source material for your creations. Yet, your works ultimately generate new visual forms. So like this one, right? JPEGs, we all know that you use a photo of 911, but then you enlarge the pixel of this JPEG file and make it into a new kinds of image, and you also blow it up very big as a large size prints, and then it really create a different kinds of image from the source image you have appropriate. And again, for this press series, you also use large format camera you scan actually the back of this press photo and then superimpose it on another layers of the front image of this photo, and then you also output it into large size prints, and it becomes your own kinds of image. And together with this news series, which is also you download it from the websites, pornography, and but then you turn it into another kinds of image. So my question to you that could you elaborate on how your approach to appropriation differs from that of the pictures generations and also that of Gerhard Richter? Thank you.
Maybe I can say it's just the consequences or the continuation of my kind of investigation on picture culture. So let's take the 90s. I think Richard Prince, Cindy Sherman, Sherry Levine, and others in New York, they made their exploration, and was not with Cindy Sherman, but with Richard Prince and Sherry Levine. It was more or less taking over one by one the original work of art from another artist. My first appropriated work was Where the Stars. But actually, in that case, I just had to realize that I cannot take this kind of high-res images of the starry night, because even though I'm equipped professionally and I'm pretty good educated on photography, I was not able. I needed help. And I needed help from an observatory. At that time, it was pretty hard for me to accept that I'm no more the author of the photograph, because I did not pull the trigger for this kind of photograph. It was somebody else. Maybe it was a machine or software that pulled the trigger. But at that time, I had to decide either I accept that help, I lose authorship, or I cannot make this kind of work. And so, yeah, finally, I gave up authorship to create this body of work. I accepted it. Yes, that probably then led to, yeah, let's say, the possibility to work with images of other authors, to take them as a kind of a scratch or source, and then create my own image with it. And I also think that it's common practice within the artist community to have, they have sketchbooks, they're collecting catalogs, they're collecting postcards. So I think every artist has a kind of collection of sketches, images that she likes, and sometimes picking things out of this kind of these sources. And yeah, the next appropriated work then was probably the JPEGs. And that was the change from, yeah, let's say analog to the digital. With the JPEGs, I had to realize that the structure of the image changed. Okay, of course, it was obvious because it went from the analog corn to the digital pixel. But within the JPEGs, I realized that there's another structure in it, and that's the traces of the compression rates. And that had something to do with the internet. Because in the very beginning, the internet was very slow, and only small images could travel fast. So the smaller the image, the faster it could travel in the internet. And to not dealing with these kind of high resolutions, they invented the JPEG. So JPEG is actually JEPG, is the shortcut for Joint Photographic Expert Group. And that was a jury who defined the compression rates. So you have a high quality compression rate, but then you have a big file and it's very slow. And if you compress it at a rate of 0, the quality gets very bad. Say hello, Coco. And this compression rate is responsible for artifacts that are normally not in the image, but they are created by the compression rate. And it's then, in the end, it's 200K, and it's very fast. And if you look at a small image on your computer screen, you probably don't recognize that it's compressed. But actually, if you zoom in, you will recognize that it has a complete new structure. So, and the structure is not an aesthetic, or there's no aesthetic reason. It's just solving a technical problem. I think this also had consequences for how we look at images. We are looking at a lot of bad quality images because they are fast and because they can circulate within seconds around the world. And so, yeah, then I just zoomed in these images, and then I created those files, or I used my own images, my own digital images, or I used found images, and then I calculated them to a smaller size, and then I added the worst compression rate, and then I had this kind of pretty painterly images that, yeah, in a way represent the photographic images of these days. And okay, I started with 9/11 because I was in New York that day, and I was in Soho, not Soho, but north of Hudson, and I saw the Twin Towers collapsing. So that was a pretty, yeah, let's say, impressing moment in my life. Okay, so the Press Plus Plus series happened more or less by chance. So I have a big affinity to space and cosmology. So I'm collecting photographs of all these things, and I found some nice images of astronauts on eBay, and yes, I bought them. And when they arrived at my house, I was very happy. I was looking at, oh, this is a great photograph, and then I turned it around and I saw the back. Turned it around again, and turned it around, and I thought the back looks at least as interesting as the front because it has all the traces of the publications. And at a certain point, I thought maybe I should combine these two images. I combine the back with the front to bring the information onto the front, but at the same time, I'm destroying actually the image itself. But I thought that's yeah, I could or I should do that. And that was the starting point. So I bought more and more press photographs with all the information on the back, and I brought them to the front. So this is also work about the distribution of photographs, because press photographs are, yeah, I would say the badliest treated genre in photography, because the photographer is trying to shoot his best images, and then comes the editor, he cuts them, they paint it over, they add croppings, etc., etc. So I want to kind of, yeah, let's say, pay tribute to this kind of genre of photography.
Thank you. I think we have more questions coming. Thank you.
好，这个谢谢鲁夫先生。这个今年的这个丽水国际双年展啊，特别有意思。这个大家看完了鲁夫的这个展览之后，我的一个好朋友，也是这次丽水国际摄影节的评委，他就跟我说，他说这个藏策啊，这个我们以前都不理解你提出那个原影像这个是怎么回事，现在看完了鲁夫的这个展览以后啊，这个哎呀，我们发现。这个你提这个概念在当时是相当超前的。我们现在说终于知道这个原摄影、原影像、原认知，这些个是非常有意思的事情。这是一个对，这是对摄影的一个更深层的一个这个探索的方向。对，所以当时我听了，我也觉得特别有意思。对，那么下面呢，我们这个有请这个胡图老师来提问，他也会对。这个向鲁夫先生这个继续探讨这方面的问题。好，胡图请。
好的，我记得啊在2022年，你在法国有一个回顾展，展览的题目呢就叫做托马斯·鲁夫的原摄影。原摄影或者是原影像呢，是关于媒介自身的一种关切和思考。虽然你所有的作品不全是跟原认知有关的，但很大一部分作品呢，仍然跟这个概念有关。那个法国回顾展的主题也抓住了你作品当中的这个特点。那么我想问的是，你最初的那个原认知是如何形成的？在后来的创作当中呢，是如何思考这一概念的？那么今后的创作是否会依然保持这个思考的习惯？谢谢。
Maybe I can answer this question pretty simple. Once I had a conversation with Bernd Becher, and we were talking about his work and about my work. And at a certain point, he said, Thomas, what I learned from my friends, the conceptual and minimalist artists, was that if you work with the media, the image should always contain the thinking about the media itself. And so that's a quote that I never forgot, and that I more or less try to how do you say include in every single series. Maybe the first series I could include it perfectly were the portraits, because the portraits, they were, I think it was the first time that I was thinking about photography, and at the same time I was taking a photograph. And the strange thing is, it's straight photography, and it's thinking about photography. And depending how I feel, I say, okay, actually this is the portrait of Pia, so it's 80% a photograph of Pia, straightforward photograph of Pia, and only 20% of Meta. And depending on the daytime, I say, no, today I would say it's 50% a straightforward photograph of Pia, and 50% thinking of about the portrait in the history of photography, etc., etc. So depends on my mood, how meta I feel. But I hope that in all my different series, you see that I'm thinking about, the history and the issues of photography.
谢谢鲁夫先生，因为我当年也是提出了原影像理论，后来我也是这些年一直在思考这个理论如何在拓展不断的拓展理论，对，现在一直拓展到了神经科学、神经美学这方面，对，刚才听到了鲁夫先生的回应也非常的有意思，以后我们可以继续的探讨这个方面，我们再把它拓展到 AI 的层面，对，就更有意思。好，那么下面请陈国森老师继续提问。
So you've already explained the process behind Press Plus Plus in great detail just now. I have a more specific question. So I'm curious, among the thousands of of the old press photographs you've scanned, what is the strangest or most impressive thing you've ever discovered on the back of that image? And had there ever been a case where something hitting on the back completely changed how you understood the image on the front? Is there any case?
No, I must confess, not really. So the back was always related to the front, but of course, sometimes it was a big surprise if you superimpose it, what kind of composition it shows up. And then also the method was also, if you can turn the photograph in two ways, you can flip it this or this. And so depending on the composition, I did it either this way or this way. But then, of course, the rest is just your own artistic practice, thinking about, oh, this is better than the other way around. So it's not a big thing. Sorry.
It doesn't matter. So exploring how these two layers can be brought together is actually very interesting as well. Yeah.
Yes, of course. The correct way would have been to do it with Röntgen, but then everything is mirrored and you cannot read anymore the back. So I had to either flip it this way or the other way around.
那么呢，下面由我来跟鲁夫来聊聊摄影的虚构性和真实性的问题。我觉得这是一个非常有意思的问题。就说鲁夫的在丽水的展览的那个作品， 就说鲁夫这个机智这个作品呢，在丽水展的时候，我实际是非常喜欢的，对。然后呢，这个鲁夫先生呢，这个他非常明确的讲，就说通过他45年的这个通过45年的这个影像实验，他这个不再相信这个摄影的纪实性和真实性。对这点我也是一样，我也是因为我一直在提出这个与其说摄影是真实，不如说是虚构。但是近来呢，我又发现了另外一个非常有趣的问题，所以呢，我也想在这里跟鲁夫进行一下讨论，我觉得也是非常有意思的问题，就说这个实际摄影跟绘画不同，就是说摄影既是虚构的，但它在另一个方面来讲也是具有真实性的。它的真实性在哪里呢？就像那个机制所揭示的，对，是那个机器跟机器之间的那个讯息的那个传递是真实的。是非人，是那个不以人的那个意识，跟人的意识是没关系的。对，那么呢，这也就是说，这个摄影的在讯息上，也就是说，这个它的数字的这个传输上，或者我们说它是一种相同信息，在这个传递上，它具有真实性。这个真实性就犹如阳光对那个绿叶的光合作用一样，它是真实的。对，而那个意义的。这个信息是不带有意义的，跟意义是分离的，而那个与意义相连接的，就是我们所理解的那个摄影的那个是虚构的。所以现在我把摄影的这个虚构性和真实性，我给分开了。对，这是我的最近的一个新提出来的观点。所以我想这个也想就这个问题，想听听鲁夫先生怎么看这个问题。就说摄影它跟绘画不一样，既有虚构性，又有真实性。真实性实际跟我们这个理解无关，它没有意义，它只是一个信息的一个传递。而在我们这个大脑或者说我们这个对影像的理解上这个实际是我们投射我们的意识投射给它的意义，这个并不具有真实性，而是虚构性的。这是我的一个基本观点。我想听听鲁夫先生怎么看。
Yeah, okay. So that's a very difficult question. Okay, so you say that if machines communicate, they are communicating correct. And the signal is that is sent is understood in the proper way. And if then I would just say it's kind of if when two human beings communicate, there's a kind of a blurriness in the communication. There can be misunderstanding. There can be misinterpretation. So if you think yeah, let's say it's okay. This is an extreme example. You shoot somebody sitting on the electric chair, and you show it to somebody else. And if that person is pro-death penalty, you should photograph to say how cruel the death penalty with the electric chair is, and he's pro. So his interpretation will be, this is a great photograph, and I'm 100% pro that this person has to die on the electric chair. And your intention was the opposite. So that's the problem with the human beings. So because it's not the brain, it's the whole body, it's the experience, it's the cultural background, it's a political opinion. All these things are playing a role when you're communicating with other people. So there's not one way to look at an image. There are 1,000 possible ways, and this is a kind of an unsharpness or blurriness that shows up pretty often. So no, we are definitely not as exact as machines, or we are not as limited as machines because we have much more in our mind, in our brain.
你比如说，就像我们现在开这个会议，我们之间的这个对话，我们都彼此是能够理解的，虽然我们未必能完全理解，但是我们每个人面前的电脑之间，它的信息在传递，但是我们每个电脑，它对我们它的信息是真实的，但是它对它的意义是不理解的。对，我感觉就是说，我想到就是摄影师也是这样，就像我们的那个相机。当它像打印设备，像这个什么，像传输设备，像这个其他的屏幕，像传递这种数字信号的时候，它实际具有物质上的真实性，具有一种机器之间的真实性。但是呢，机器之间是不懂意义的，是这个跟我们的接受的信息是完全不一样的。所以我们接受信息是虚构的，而机器之间的是真实的。这点跟绘画我觉得是不一样的，这也是他们两者之间最大的区别，这是我的一个想法。
Yes, of course, because yeah, to take a photograph, you have this kind of technical apparatus. It's a complete system that is transferring things, and if you do make a painting, it's of course a completely different, other handling of things. Yes, but of course, it's good that the phone call, my iPhone or my camera does not make an interpretation of the image. It could be horrible. Or maybe the iPhone would say, no, I will not transmit message. I don't like it.
AI 貌似听懂了，实际他也不懂。接下来呢，进入到这个第三个单元。第三个单元呢，由这个陈国森老师开始提问。
Ms. Hof, my last question is about how important material is in photography. Because I recently translated the Art Forum article, The Future of Photography, a roundtable into Chinese. And in that discussion, Thomas Demand mentioned that he now prints on copper because traditional papers are disappearing. He argued that the material support doesn't matter as long as the viewer, the audience, they can recognize the photographic equation, which means the world in front of the camera, the setup, and the person behind it. That is enough. But in literature exhibition, your DOPE series has changed from the originally planned velvet carpet to canvas, and you've said that you value the image more than the material. But the title of the series clearly points to psychedelic, aka dope, and the soft carpet would have been a very direct way of physically evoking that hallucinatory sensation, whereas the canvas is hard and flat. So if a change of material completely changed the viewer's sensory experience, why do you still say that the material is not so important? In this specific case, isn't softness actually part of the work? Maybe Thomas Demand say that the photographic equation is still there, so it doesn't matter. But since you yourself mentioned this as a kind of regret, so I would like to ask, what did the carpet do that the canvas simply can't? In your view, is the material merely a passive support, or is it actually a key factor in whether this photographic equation succeeds or fails? Yeah, thank you. This is my question.
Okay, maybe I can say that I first create the photograph or shoot the photograph, or in terms of dope, I create the image. And when I have done that, then I start thinking about the presentation. And I have done practice this for 40 years. So small works go into, they are printed on photographic paper, then comes passepartout and the frame. In terms of the large scale images, I'm using the photographic print, and then it's a DSEC mounted and then a frame, because technically and also in terms of weight, it's the best solution to do that. But in terms of dope, yes, of course, I started then again, did a large scale print and put it on the wall, and it looked good, but I was not really happy with it, because also the printing on, even though it was not photographic print or chromogenic print, but it was an inkjet, it was still too technically, and the image itself was, the image was opposite of a technical looked like the opposite of a technical process. And so I was thinking about, okay, now that we are no more in the age of the chromogenic print, it disappeared. So Kodak doesn't produce the paper anymore. Now we depend on inkjet. And in the meantime, you can do inkjet on a lot of different materials. So you, in a way, I would say you have more freedom than before. 20 years ago, photography always had one surface, and that was the chromogenic print. There was no other possible surface. Okay, you could choose between glossy and matte, but you did not have a nice range of materials you could print on. Okay, so then I thought, okay, maybe I print on canvas now, but they look pretty painterly, so that would be, I don't want to compete with paintings. Then I thought about other fabrics like satin, but there was also problems with size, because all these fabrics, they are only 150 wide, so far as I know. And at a certain point, I thought, why don't I try carpet? And so I made an investigation. Is it possible, and who does that in Europe? And I found a company that does that pretty well. And they, made a test printing, and it was, so I only had to just tonality and contrast, because if you change material, you have to adjust everything for the new material. And I was surprised, because it was the perfect fit, because the softness of the carpet fit perfectly with the image. And even though a photographic print would have looked much more precise in terms of resolution, because you have if you have a carpet, it softens it also. But no, that's, in this case, it was, I would say it was the perfect choice. And as I mentioned before, now that we are in the age of inkjet, you can print on any material you want. You can print on sand, you can print on aluminium, on glass, whatever fits best for your image.
我能不能接着问一个问题？
好的，好的，好的，好的。
因为我这个问题可能跟材料更相关，然后再请
好的，好的。
老师来问最后那个问题。我觉得这样的话可能好一点。All
好的。
right, Thomas, if I may, I also ask a related question with the material which can be output by the machine of the photographic images. The rise of AI algorithm and rapid computational system has reconfigured the photographic image from something fixed, retrospective, to something generative and elastic, and the larger size and the heightened sense of scale and an increased involvement with color printing of photography have brought in problems concerning with the stabilities of prints. So once photographs began to be appreciated in a way that only paintings or sculpture had been, the issues of stability became much more central. So as you know that Thomas Dimond has recently output his work on copper, which in a way goes back to the earliest ways of fixing the image when photography was first invented. And also you, as you mentioned just now with your series of dope, you outputted on industrial velvet carpet, which I think creates something textile, but maybe deteriorating in terms of its material over time. So my question to you is that are you also concerned about the longevities of your work in terms of material or not? Thank you.
Yes, of course. In the meantime, I have pretty often the requests that collectors would like to have a reprint because they bought the photograph 30 years ago and it become yellowish. It's slightly fading away. Of course, I then replace them. So they have to pay the production cost, but plus a bit of a fee for me, for my work. And then it's replaced and then it will, yeah, that's what's happening. I think it's even worse with the very early video work stuff from the 70s where the tape is more or less, yeah, it's no more available and it's breaking, it disappears. And of course, I think because I work in editions and the photograph should always look as good as possible. And so it's actually, if it's an edition out of 4, I can easily replace the one that was exposed too much sunlight, and yeah, make it look good again. So I prefer that, even though some of the conservators, they say, no, it's a vintage print from the 1980s, we have to keep it. And actually, that's a big discussion from the conservative side, but actually, I prefer to make a new print, and yeah, I say that's the best. And as long as the artist lives, it's a vintage print.
All right, thank you.
我先来提问鲁夫先生的另外一个问题，就是这个鲁夫先生特别强调这个他的探索实际都是关于感知的本质，这个问题。那么这个问题呢，我也非常的感兴趣，而且我特别的认为，所有的实际上这个审美的本质。以及这个艺术的特别核心的问题，实际就是感知的本质，包括摄影在内，所有的视觉艺术，实际上它的这种真实就是感知的真实，而不可能是在线的真实。所以呢，我对这个问题也是非常的感兴趣，所以我也特别想听听鲁夫先生对这个感知的本质这个问题是如何思考的。
I'm not sure whether I got the question. So you think perception is always about aesthetics?
我认为我是说这个，就说鲁夫先生呢，在他的这个就策展人在他的前言里提到说，这个鲁夫在一直探索感知的本质。也就是说，我认为呢，鲁夫对感知的本质呢，在这方面的艺术探索呢，是很有研究的。那么我对这个问题呢也是非常感兴趣的，所以我呢特别想听听鲁夫先生是如何对于感知的本质这个问题进行思考的。
Okay, probably the perception of photography, and no, it's not only photography. It's a bit more. Yes, then maybe we should go back. So photography has always been called pencil of nature. So it's the best machinery to record reality. Yeah, let's say record reality. But of course, because there are a lot of different interests to not to manipulate, but to guide you with information. Yeah, it's the same with information. To guide you with information to make you think that this and that. And so the worst thing is advertisement photography. It's lying like hell. The same with propaganda photography. They're just lying. And so what I'm always trying to show in my difference here is that you should always look very carefully at an image, and best thing would actually be with photographer while he was shooting it. Then you have the complete overview and all the information that the photograph shows. But that's nearly impossible, or almost always not impossible. So you have to improve your skills to read photographs. And that's what I always try to do, to help to increase your skills in reading photographs so that they cannot manipulate you or bring you into wrong direction, etc., etc. And yeah, probably most of the people, they are just not aware of that, how much manipulation and how the consciousness can be manipulated by photorealistic images. So I say photorealistic because in the meantime, there are a lot of AI generated images. They look like photographs, but of course, they are not at all photographs. And so, yeah, it's about perception, but also, let's say, I always hope to make a kind of enlightenment to show how the photographic medium works.
鲁夫先生刚才提到一个非常重要的问题，就是说感知也可以是被操控的，对，感知有时候也是会骗人的，是的，是的，非常重要的一个思路，对，非常好，非常好。
鲁夫先生，你的一系列作品啊，从报纸照片、新闻照片到裸体、JPG 和中国图景等等，你故意让影像暴露它的功能的痕迹，比如新闻照片这个作品当中，把照片背后编辑的批注、印章、文字说明、裁剪标记跟影像内容一起呈现出来。在 JPG 这个作品当中，像素结构进行放大，跟照片的内容一起呈现。在我看来，这就是在提醒观众，在观看一张照片的时候，需要同时去关注影像背后的影像生产的机制。影像生产机制本质上就是一种编码，那么这种编码过程呢，原来观众是看不到的，但你呢，把本来看不见的变成了可见。这里我想问的是，你如何来平衡影像的内容跟影像背后的生产的机制？比如在裸体这个作品当中，情色这个主题呢，要比类似于像素化的模糊要更加凸显。但是在 JPG 这个作品当中，影像的主题是多样性的，也就是说，主题是被故意削弱的，数码照片的像素结构却被凸显出来。那么这两个作品的题目其实也显示了这一点。谢谢。
So actually, in the new tiers, it's I choose a kind of very small pixel, but the pixel should be still visible, because I want to let people know that they are looking at a digital file, that they are actually not looking at a photograph, but that they are looking at a digital file. So the pixel is pretty decent, but it's still visible. So that was the concept with the nudes, and yeah, with the JPEGs, it's obvious. I really wanted to show the artifacts that are created with the compression, that it's a completely artificial not new image, but it looks familiar, but actually the structure has changed a lot. The balance between image and thing, yeah. So it's with every image you have to check. So it's not a process that is automatized. It's not automatic. I have to work from every image to the next one. Sorry, this is a bad explanation.
谢谢。
That's a nice aspect that you very good aspect that you mentioned, the encoding of the production of the images. So that's really something that that's a big part of my work. Thank you.
So yeah, I think, on behalf of the whole panel, I would like to ask you one last question. So since the emergence of digital image editing technology and also internet in the late 1990s, as well as the oceans of images created by people around the world on internet and the social media, and especially the images that can be generated by AI. Do you think that photography will become less powerful or more powerful? Do you believe in some people saying that with the powerful AI which can generate images is the end of the photography? So what do you really think about the futures of photography in your eye? Thank you.
I think it's just with painting. So photography is dead. Long live photography. So no, I don't think that it will disappear. Maybe it will become less, and okay, probably AI generated images, they will cover 80% of the social medias, but maybe at a certain point people will get tired of that and will respond with, let's say, real photographs, and we'll go back to real photographs because it's much more fun, and it's much more, you need skills, and it's unique thinking, and so actually I don't worry about the future of photography. It will continue, and I think there are a lot of young people out there who like to practice it. So no, I have no worries.
Thank you.
今天聊的特别好哈，这个很多的这个非常有趣的问题，既是围绕着鲁夫在丽水的这个展览这个具体的作品展开，但是呢，又从这些作品的这些个问题很发散，对，到了很多这个非常的这个超越了，甚至超越摄影本身的问题，对，包括 AI 的问题，包括这个大脑的问题，包括这个影像的这个技术，这个物质媒介和这个生理媒介之类的，对这些很多很多问题非常棒。刚才呢，鲁夫先生那个对这个 AI 问题的这个回答呢，我也表示非常的同意。就好比人呢，就是我一直把那个 AI 呢，就带有那种虚构更多的这个 所谓的物理空间的虚构性，但它并不等于就由此丧失了感知本身的真实性。对，就像我在前面提到问题里，我要把这两个分开。对，那么就像人既需要这个白天清醒的时候，在这个世界里他这个如何行动来这个他也需要做梦一样。对，他在做梦的时候，他也不会觉得自己是在这个就丧失了他的这个真实性。对，所以呢，另外就是还是这个鲁夫先生提到一点，我也同意，就是说人们对一个过于技术的媒介，当他这个是习惯了以后，当他的新奇这个劲儿过去以后，他可能会对那个传统的这些东西啊，这个以往的这些个身体的记忆的东西，可能会更加的感兴趣。就如今天我们的这个写字都不用钢笔写了，但是书法也没有消失。我们的对很多的古老的工艺。今天实际已经完全在现实中失去任何的这个实用价值了，但是它恰恰的被作为了这个非文化这个物质遗产。对，也是对今天喜欢的人也是越来越多。当然，摄影不可能成为非物质文化遗产，对，它会这个在这个未来的这种新的社会环境中，继续这个发挥它这个更多的潜在性里面，这些东西我们可能有的能够想到，有的可能都不是我们今天都能够所这个预料到的。对，这也恰恰是未来对我们的能够给我们的惊喜啊，能够超越我们的想象的这个非常有趣的部分。好，那么今天呢，非常的感谢托马斯·鲁夫先生到服务器艺术来做客，与我们聊了这么多有趣的话题。那么也非常的感谢几位嘉宾，姜蓉老师、国森老师和糊涂老师，也更加的感谢我们今天的翻译静怡和给我们提供这个整个后台技术支持的杨坤老师。对，最后呢，我们这个依旧要非常的感谢今天收看我们这个播出的广大的观众朋友。对，这个我们相信关于鲁夫的话题，我们到今天也仍然没有结束。对，我们仍然在后面的讨论中继续进行。摄影的话题将是一个永恒的话题。好，谢谢，晚安。
感谢各位老师的精彩分享，也感谢大家的用心聆听。本期服务器艺术、当代影像、路径及其可能第17期与托马斯·鲁夫谈原摄影的探索和实践线上论坛圆满结束，也非常感谢各院校机构和媒体的大力支持与参与。我们期待下次再见，谢谢。